integrated these programs into their own? This is a vital question. What I would like to do from all of the responses, including Jagdish Gundara's statements to us, I would like to show you what I have culled from everyone as best practices, and there are close to 14 of them. Now, a best practice is actually the use of knowledge, skills, and dispositions, ways that people value, act, behave, that have been collected over years, have been analyzed and studied, and have been in fact shown as evidence for learning outcomes. These best practices have been found in OECD throughout all of these studies on research, but let me just recapitulate the ones that we've heard today. 1, language support resources. Without those, kids do not advance, and everyone has mentioned the significance of that. 2, parental engagement, and not simply of parents coming to work or do activities in the school, but to carry on activities, as you mentioned in your schools, after school, in meetings, collaborating, creating projects. 3, cognitive learning with extracurricular opportunities, science clubs, math clubs, opportunities that go beyond the school hours. Number 4, peer learning and mentorship, which you mentioned in Germany, but in fact, which is a universal model and can be used everywhere. Number 5, community relations in terms of the school being in the community and the community being in the school. A very tight relationship which should be fostered, and I know that, for example, the Cosmica school where I've been working, this is one of the principles that is most valued, the community in the school and the school in the community. Number 6, the advocacy of students and self-empowerment. Students need advocates in their teachers. They can't simply be bystanders. And it's important to understand that that advocacy, as was mentioned here, is one that begins by teachers helping students to see themselves as they are and to be able to become self-empowered. Number 7, the opportunity to experiment with new ideas, trying out things, feeling them out, figuring out whether they work, new ideas, new projects, even simple student projects. Number 8, the use of homework and follow through. We know this from the AERA, the American Educational Research Association, that 15 minutes of homework actually gives a very high rendition in achievement if it is followed through and if it is relevant to the learning of students, not simply busy work. Number 9, the start of school at an early period of one's life. In other words, the ability for children to go to primary school, to early schools, to be able to engage with learning at a very early age, and to be able to begin to see books and literature and information as a basis of their own empowerment. Number 10, non-segregated schools. Schools where the idea of concentration of minorities as zwarte schools, as they are called in the Netherlands, become elite schools. And certainly the case of L'École des Trois that we visited yesterday is a good example of an elite school, a school that looks at the talents of the children. Number 11, interfaith discussions. Why? Because they lead, as you mentioned, to the opportunity of moral educational choices and thinking and being relevant in today's very competitive society. Number 12, improved study skills with a focus on developing cognitive skills. It is not sufficient that a student should feel good about himself. That is one level, but the more important skill is that a student feel good about what they're doing and learning, because that guarantees cognitive advancement. Number 13, the after-school programs, the weekend school that you mentioned, the opportunity for added value in learning Dutch, mathematics, preparation for the CITO exam, or additional support. Ask yourselves, and the last one I think that I have here is the sports activities which you mentioned, the idea of collective power, of being able to have robotica, to have Inespo, to have programs that actually exhilarate and induce students to understand that they can make it out there in the big world. To me, what sounds ironic of all of this list that we know, we have seen in practice, is that it is not part of the school building, and it is not part of the school infrastructure in many places. And I would ask you to ask yourselves, why? Why is that the case? So I'd like to, after having said that, open it up for discussion, and I'd like you to ask the panel or ask individuals within the panel the kinds of questions that you have. And in Portuguese and in Spanish, in America you say brainstorm, but in Spanish we say una lluvia de ideas, a shower of ideas. So may I have your shower of ideas? And if you could raise your hand, I'll start naming you. Let's start with you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, panel. Really exciting work, absolutely wonderful. I want to just ask if any of you have a response to this question. It is to me that the mentoring model presented by Mitsuo seems in a way to crystallize a lot of what you've all been talking about. In a very micro way, it provides the essence of, I think, a lot of your hopes. And that fits in with what I wanted to follow on from what I said this morning, which is that if you want to encourage tolerance, you have to think of yourself as the other person, oneself as another. And indeed, my favorite philosopher, Paul Ricoeur, would argue that you only really learn about yourself through understanding yourself reflected in the other, and the other as the same and as different. So you can see why I suggest that the mentoring of the other models are brilliant, but mentoring also gives that crystallized version. And therefore, I wanted to ask you whether anybody on the panel has experience of engaging those who are against such moves. In other words, to put it really bluntly, have any of you had experience of programs where a person who is explicitly racist is engaged in a mentoring program like Mitsuo's? Now, there are many things which in my democratic core, genetic core says, well, you can't do that, it's hopeless. But actually, we are all obliged to behave as if we live in a democratic society. And yet, when I worked with the British government, which I've done intensively for some years, I say to them, you should engage the British National Front. They just look at me as if to say, we wouldn't want to do that, they're not very nice. But that's the whole point. So that's my inquiry. Thank you.
Who would in the panel? Anyone wants to respond to that?
Could I just, I sort of, it's like I dropped a bombshell. Could I just add to that this could become a requirement, couldn't it? It could, if 2020 lives up to our expectations, then it could become a requirement in schools, for example, that mentoring is compulsory. But then you'd have to train the head teachers, and the policy makers would have to really believe in it, and the compulsory element would have to somehow sit within democratic frameworks, which is problematic when it's about ideas and views. So I know it's not easy, but thank you in advance.
We had a project with the youth workers where we try to engage with the right wing, the British National Party and the National Front itself. But we were criticized very heavily because people said, you're giving these racist space. Our point was that it is a research project to try to see what are the kind of issues that they throw up, which we need to then look at in terms of working ensuring that the youth workers can cope with them in the local communities. But as you rightly said, every time you try to do something like that, which is slightly different and innovative, you get criticized. But could I make just one point? We've talked about schools and we've talked about teachers, and somehow we will go away thinking that it's the teachers who might be large part of the problem. In fact, that is not the case. The case really, in my view, is that the people who so-called trained teachers do not do a good job. It's people like us who work in higher education who call it teacher training. Now think about people who are doctors, lawyers, architects, dentists, and so on and so forth. They're educated and trained. So a teacher should not merely be trained, a teacher should be educated as well. So what I think we should be looking at seriously is intercultural teacher education. Intercultural teacher education for a diverse Europe, which tries to ensure that when a teacher goes in front of a complex classroom of the kind that Professor Nikas is mentioning in your school, which you're trying to do innovative work, does have the skills, knowledge and understandings to confront the classroom. Nowadays, the young people are far better informed about issues than most of the teachers, and it is not the fault of the teachers, it is the fault of so-called narrow-minded teacher trainers who are not doing the job they should be doing. Thank you.
Any other person on the panel? If not, yes, could you please?
Bonjour, j'interviens, donc je suis Monsieur Kertel-Nekati de Paris, donc directeur d'un établissement scolaire. Voilà, je voulais dire que on nous parle souvent donc de l'intervention des parents dans l'enseignement, et la base du comportement et de la réussite de l'enfant est surtout basée sur la famille. Donc chez lui ici, le côté sentiment dans la famille, et la famille est une famille heureuse, épanouie, et tout se passe correctement, ça aide à l'enfant à avoir une bonne attitude en cours, et de l'autre côté avoir une meilleure appréhension et une meilleure réussite. Donc que pensez-vous donc de l'école des parents, puisque l'école intervient au niveau des élèves, mais elle doit être aussi surtout l'école des parents. Donc une question à ce niveau-là. Et donc forcément, sur ce que vient d'intervenir monsieur, donc le professeur, sur l'enseignement des enseignants, justement. Donc l'enseignant est un modèle, et l'enseignement visuel, je veux dire, parce qu'un enfant à un certain âge n'écoute pas ce que vous dites, mais visuellement, il répète ce que vous faites. Donc c'est pour ça qu'il faut être un modèle à ce niveau-là aussi. Et ça part de la tenue vestimentaire jusqu'à tout ce qu'on peut imaginer au niveau du professeur. Donc ça c'est très important, et j'aimerais apporter un petit point un petit témoignage sur ça. Voilà, donc avoir des enseignants modèles aide donc à la réussite de l'enfant. Merci.
Does anyone want to answer or respond to that question regarding parenting opportunities? Yeah?
Thank you very much for this remark. I would only strongly support your statement. I believe very strongly in the power of the so-called two-generation strategies, where parents learn together with their children. It is very often in the most deprived circumstances that parents are very eager to learn in the period when they have small children, and when they see how children are being prepared for school. So schools have a responsibility there to liaise, for example, with adult education centers in organizing courses for parents as well. And there are very nice examples of this, including in Belgium, where schools, together with adult education centers, organize literacy courses for parents, language courses, courses about education, also collective activities with parents, because schools are not just centers where you learn as an individual, but you have social learning as well. Even schools where parents learn together with teachers, where they have joint training sessions with the teachers. I think these are all very powerful models.
Thank you very much. Any other question from the public? Yes, monsieur? Yes.
Thank you very much. I am Andre. I come here just as a parent of children who are at primary school and high school level. I agree completely with you of the idea of having all schools in any country being part of the community, and the community being present, visible in the school, the way the community it is. And indeed also, at a certain level, to have the teacher staff, the leading staff of the school, having really a connection with the community in which the school is based. And we've seen that from École des Étoiles. One of the major issues the leadership told us yesterday was that the school that school seemed to be a place where happiness can be felt among the children, among the staff, even the environment. That's what we have been taught. Is very conducive to have a good learning environment. And the children who are there, 50% they are from immigrant origin. They seem to be performing better than when they are in another situation. So I think really that is, now my question is, how do we ensure that the school is within the community and the community is within the school?
Let me pose that to the panelists. Anyone wanting to respond or react? Yes? Anyone? Just hit the green button.
Okay. Thank you for the remark. I think we just have to agree with you. What needs to be done to happen? Yes, partly it's the teacher education. I think a lot of research also shows that it has to come from the top of the school, from the leadership, from the management, and that training needs to be provided. There really needs to be a very dedicated leader. That change doesn't happen over a year. It happens usually over a span of 10 years. Edith was talking about an initiative starting 2003 and still is hesitant saying it's an initial stage. So it's a very long-term commitment. And what you have in most schools is people who were traditionally prepared for their profession. None of them were given education and training in becoming mediator or person engaged with community. You have subject academical teachers who have really very little understanding very often, not always. I'm a teacher by my background. I taught for 10 years, so if I'm critical of teachers, then I'm talking about myself as well. That's why it doesn't happen so often. You have which professionals prepared for something else than the reality basically requests at the moment. And that transformation, the social change, takes time. It takes the leadership. It takes the vision. A lot of experiences. What is, I think, important is also that good practice is sort of more visible. I think it's very important that other schools are linked to each other. There is very little at the moment. We see cooperation among schools where there is a peer learning across schools within a city. And I think that would be very important also for all of us here to think about how that could happen. How can schools pull each other in the same directions? Because I think when the school principals talk to each other, they talk about peers and equals, and there could be some momentum gathered there. So No, that transformation is going to take time and it will need a lot of push.
And if I just may add one single point to that, the notion of the school within the community and the community within the school really comes from the Basis School in Rotterdam, which is part of the Cosmica Stichting. This is one of the principles by which the teachers, the directors, the parents, the children in that school believe in. And what they do is they go and interview the policeman on the corner, or they bring the mayor of the city into the school, or the parents enact some theatrical performance with the children bringing people from the community who bring in the food. So it's a way of interacting so that there are no walls. It is, the school is in the community, but the community is living in the school as well. And that's one example of where I've seen it effectively work out.
Well, I'm happy also to answer as regards the Flemish situation. The notion of extended schools, as we call it in Dutch, brede scholen, comes from the Netherlands and is gradually becoming a hype, I would say, in Flemish education. And I think it's not just a Dutch invention. The movement of extended schools exists for a long time in Denmark and in Nordic countries, also in the United States to some extent. The idea is that school is, has to network with the rest of the local community. Some schools are afraid of becoming an extended school because they fear of, say, overburdening their teachers. Now, there is an interesting research in the Netherlands concerning the perception of teachers and also of school principals in extended schools as compared to traditional schools. And the nice thing in extended schools, where you have many more extracurricular activities and a lot of additional projects, is that teachers in extended schools do not work more than in traditional schools. Why? Because they have good friends. They have good relationships with cultural centers, with youth clubs, with other actors in society who come and supplement the teaching staff inside the school. And by building partnerships with the environment, you can achieve a lot more without necessarily investing much more. There are plenty of partners who are eager to collaborate with schools in order to also recruit their own customers, if you like. The school principals, on their part, they worked more than average, but they responded to the survey that they felt more happy, and that in a way this compensated by far for the additional work. So it's not just the children that feel happier in extended schools, it is also parents, teachers, leaders.
If there are no other, you'll be the last question, because after that we'll close the session. Yes.
Thank you very much. It's not a question, actually, more an answer to your question. Why are all your ideas not included in the public schools? Well, they can't. They don't have the money. They have classes of 30 students. They don't have books. I have students coming to me with a few photocopied sheets of paper, often so dark you can hardly read them. Even worse, when the pieces of paper are handwritten, so you have to decipher the handwriting. There is no table of contents, so they don't see the structure of the course. They cannot see how their knowledge develops logically. And worse even, they sometimes come with books which have such big errors that it is simply a scandal. So I think you better face up to the reality. The work you're doing is necessary. You need a parallel system of education in society, and particularly in the areas where there are schools in where poor people live, because there the situation is even worse. Go to Molenbeek. Well, at the end of the education in Molenbeek, they are supposed to have an education which entitles them to go to university. That's ridiculous. So what you're doing, it's necessary. And don't count on the public schooling system taking over your ideas.
You have a comment?
Yes, I totally agree with this. Yeah, and also the other question before, I think engagement has always, it's always a matter of time, spending time, and time is always connected and related to the finance, of course. What means that, yeah, what kind of incentives can we create that such an environment can be created? This should be the question. For that I do not have an answer, but I think this is maybe the point, so that the schools can have the free room for their creativity to yeah, work out new ideas.